All right. Cool, man. So I got a guy that, another 2010 USNA grad on here today. So that's fun. Fellow sprint football coach. So we coached football together. You were a sprint player, and then became a coach, as did I. That was awesome. So what's on your mind today, man? How you doing?
First, I'm great. Tony, it's great to see you. And I appreciate you bringing me on here. What's on my mind today? I can't tell you how busy we've been. So after getting out of the military here fairly recently, back in 2022, I got into practicing law. So I'm an attorney in DC, and I handle cybersecurity incident responses, amongst other things. But we have a very heavy focus on cybersecurity, and I can't tell you how busy we've been, especially in the past several months.
And for that, I know how busy you are, and I'm extremely grateful that you got on here with me today. I followed your stuff. I read your book. I actually listened to your book when I was out on the lake and I was fishing. I was in my zone.
Hopefully on 2x speed. That's what I always tell people. It's a little slow if you listen to it on 1x speed.
I'm actually a fan of the 1x speed. I've tried the 1.5. I've done the 2x speed. The 1x speed is actually better for me because it's better to capture that pause for effect. But really good stuff. I know what you do right now and what your mind is and what you're working on is a big thing for a lot of people right now. They don't yet realize the impact that could be. So you're the co-author of a book. You're my second author I've gotten on here. The first one was Mike Stedman, doing the boxing thing, doing the branding thing. Yeah. So, the podcast that I do, all the audio uploads are through his Ironbound media company. Actually, he just let me get in on that. But how is it to write a book? How is that for you? I mean, from a writing a book standpoint, I've been thinking about doing that, but I've also been like, how do I do that? How'd that work for you?
Honestly, for me, it was the best release. It was something that I had been thinking about for quite some time. It's all back up, and I'll give you kind of a lay of the land of where the book came from. My co-author, Bill Holstein, is a career journalist. He's a brilliant guy. He spent several years, I think almost a decade, in China as the Beijing bureau chief for Business Week. Turns out he reached out to me on LinkedIn one day because I post pretty regularly about all things cybersecurity and a lot of things national security, focused on China, focused on Russia, hence the name of the book. He reaches out to me, he says, hey, seems like we're of like minds. Well, it turns out his daughter and my sister were roommates at Cornell and were best friends forever. And unbeknownst to me, when he and I started linking up, that we had this connection. So fortuitous. In 2021, I think, he and I decided we were going to team up and write an article. And so we published it in the National Interest. And it was pretty eye-opening as we were going through the process of writing that article. And it was an expose on how the Chinese were able to access companies who were operating in China, had data centers in China, or just doing business with China from a legal perspective, and then from a technical perspective, how they were able to access their networks and access the data that reside on those networks, to include personal information, to include trade secrets, and then all of the Chinese laws that permit them to do it. In 2022, early 2022, we were looking at, maybe we should write another article. And I posed to Bill, I said, hey, what do you think about writing a book? I'm getting out of the military. This is something that I'm really passionate about, and I think we have a lot to say. And he agreed. And so we dove into this in November-ish of, I'm sorry, I have my dates wrong, November-ish of 2021. Started pitching to different publishers. We wrote the first 3 chapters and socialized them pretty quickly. We got an agent. Pretty quickly, we got a publisher lined up. And then we actually started writing the book in late April, May of 2022. And so during that time frame, I was actually studying for the bar exam. And so I would go all day long studying for the bar, wanting to really gouge my eyes out as I was going through contract law and family law and everything that I had to study for.
Not fun, right?
Exactly. And then I'd pull back from that and I'd spend 2, 3, 4 hours a day writing about something that I enjoyed and writing about something that I was actually passionate about. So in a span of about 4 or 5 months, Bill and I churned out the remaining 10 plus chapters, got it ready for submission, submitted to the publisher, and a little under a year later it was on the shelves.
Nice. You mentioned like, hey, I'm about to get out and I'd like to do this with you. So like, what was going through your mind when you're like, hey, I can now get out and be released from whatever and find a zone where I really want to spend my time, and you're the guy for me?
Yeah.
So,
well, and for that, I guess that's two different questions. So Bill and I are very different. We're very similar mindset, but Bill was a conscientious objector from the Vietnam War, much older than I am, brilliant guy. But we have a very similar opinion as it relates to national security and the threats that we're facing. And so we were coming at this problem from two very different angles, but coming to the same conclusion, which is what I think. Part of what makes our book so powerful is that it's not just this military mindset that I was coming from, or the intelligence community where I was coming from, but it's that side of it. But it's also from the journalist side. It's also from the academic and Bill. It's also from the left. And so we look at it from a lot of different angles. When I was getting out, so a little bit about my background. I did after the academy, I did about 12 and a half years active duty as an intelligence officer. I was in counterintelligence and human intelligence for the vast majority of that time, and deployed and stationed all over the world. The last about 6 years, I was at U.S. Cyber Command as the senior counterintelligence advisor, and then as the chief of counterintelligence and human intelligence for the Cyber National Mission Force. And so in those capacities, I had access to a ton of different information, a ton of really being able to peel the curtain back and see what was actually going on in this war for cyberspace. And what I came to realize in talking to a lot of business leaders, talking to a lot of even law enforcement, was that very few people had the geopolitical picture or the larger
or
picture.
the wherewithal to actually think about that until it happens,
Right.
And then you have
exactly.
Yeah.
And then when you're reacting, you're looking at it through a soda straw. And so the intent with the book and what Bill and I were trying to put together was this is a zoomed out view of this war that we see very clearly going on. We don't call it a war as a nation. We don't call it a war, but it's something that there is an ongoing battle, and every single company.
I was in Vegas, and I was walking the Strip, and at one point we went through. I think it was like the Venetian. Everything was shut down, and I was like, "What's going on?" Oh, there was a cyber attack, and then the next day in the news, it was like Venetian shut down for cyber attack and lost millions of dollars for this instance.
Yeah. So. And that was a ransomware attack. Actually, interestingly, I have a client that was hit with that exact same ransomware variant around that exact same time, but you'll never hear their name because they did everything right. And they were able to rebound from it, and they were able to be successful. Didn't have insurance, but didn't matter. They were able to rebound. They were resilient. And that's really the name of the game. It's understanding the threats and being able to rebound, being able to fight through the incident, fight through the attack, keep your business operational, and come out relatively unscathed.
Gotcha. I have a question about that insurance later. But first, I want to go back because what I want to do with this whole price of admission thing is every time I talk to someone, I like to get their background. I want to get their story. I want to get it from the very beginning of their, childhood, upbringing, going through the system. What's your story?
Well, so I, like you, went to Naval Academy, proud graduate of the class of 2010, Invictus. But the whole reason behind the drive to the academy, the drive to military service, that all came from 9/11. And I think a lot of the guys that are in our generation are like right around our year group. That's the case. I mean, we were in middle school. We were seeing the news, and it was like one of those moments.
I got to inject right here from my original first episode podcast guest, Cameron Marshall. no prefrontal cortex. I just want to murder. I just want to get it. I just want to get after it. And that's a drive that takes people into the military, right?
That's exactly it. And when I was, my eighth grade brain was, I want to be a Marine Corps sniper. That's all I want to do. I want to go get some. I want to go overseas, and now nobody could tell me otherwise. I except for my father, and we took a couple of tours, and he introduced me to the different academies, and said, "Hey, this is another option to get to that same path." So we went and visited West Point on like December 31st, and it's the cold gray of the Hudson Valley. It was miserable, like as everything at West Point is. And then I went to the Naval Academy, beautiful Annapolis, in like the May-June time frame, and the birds are chirping, and they're like beautiful women walking around downtown Annapolis. And suddenly I'm thinking, I think the Naval Academy is probably a better choice than West Point. And of course it was, for a variety of reasons.
A recruiting factor from all those guys that go to Navy football, Army versus Navy, got a little bit of an edge there. So absolutely.
There's a difference between the Chesapeake Bay, and the Hudson River Valley in February. So, but yeah, so the reason what really drove me to it was 9/11 and that desire to serve. And a lot of that, that has, I would say that has been a pretty significant hallmark of my life, is the desire to serve and to put national security interests first. And even now that I've gotten out of active duty, I'm still in reserves, but if I'm not doing something that directly impacts national security, that directly impacts and improves our standing in the world or safeguards us, I've lost my focus. And so that's my lodestar. That's where I am. That's what drives me. So throughout high school, I played 3 varsity sports for all 4 years: wrestling, football, lacrosse, all things where I was able to just go out and hit people as many times as possible. And
it's a release, baby.
Absolutely. Went to the Naval Academy, got into sprint football, and was surrounded by Marines. And it was just everything aligned for me. So when I graduated and I was, I was hitting the fleet, I knew that I wanted to keep that passion in front of me. I knew that I wanted to continue serving and find different opportunities. For me personally, I like to build things. I like to come into a situation where something didn't exist before, and to build it up, create it, to build teams, to establish precedent, to create something that's going to be long lasting and impactful. And I found a bunch of different opportunities to do that. Almost every single tour that I had, every single unit I was at, I had opportunities to do that, which was great. And now that I'm out, the law firm at Buchanan, Ingersoll and Rooney, we've stood up our cybersecurity and data privacy practice group, and we're very much building it. And we're building it in a model that is going to be impactful for national security, that's going to serve our clients, but that ultimately is going to be it's going to be filled with attorneys who have a technical prowess, who have a strong passion and desire to do this, because that's really what drives it. That's what drives us. And when you're working 14, 16-hour days in response to a ransomware incident, it's not the money that keeps you going. It's the mission.
No doubt. 14 and 16-hour days. Been there. But probably on a smaller scale. I think your purpose is probably a little bit bigger. So, well, cool, dude. Let's talk more about your book, because I read your book. Very detailed, very, not just high level, very, down to the point on a lot of different issues that someone may be thinking about. So, for one, I loved your opener on your dedication statement. And it's, totally your style. It was, the book is dedicated to our wives for enduring the agony of living with the authors. And I thought that was funny because I got one of those as well. Cut from the same cloth, different spaces, but sucked me right in from the very beginning. I already talked about writing a book and how that felt. how you structured it. That was another thing I had written down. One other thought on that, when you wrote that book, was there a strategy in writing it? Like, was there a way that you structured your thought process and putting it all together, or did you just start writing and then you just put it on paper?
It was very much thought out before we ever put pen to paper or hand to keyboard. We wanted to clearly articulate what cyber warfare was, because right now, if you look at it, whenever you say cyber warfare, it conjures up the idea of U.S. Cyber Command or the military in general conducting destructive cyber operations or offensive cyber operations that are going to make things go boom. Right? That's cyber warfare. Whenever we think about warfare, that in general, that's what you think about. And honestly, that's the way that we're structured from a policy, from a legal perspective, from an authorities perspective. Anything that makes something go boom, that's got to be cybercom. That's got to be the military, right? That can't be the FBI that's doing that. That can't be NSA that's doing that, because they have different authorities. They're either doing law enforcement activities, investigations, counterintelligence in some cases, or on the NSA side, they're conducting espionage. Well, our adversaries don't view it in that same way. And our adversaries, if you turn the table, they look at cyber warfare and they say, well, this isn't just things that target valid military targets and make them go boom. This isn't just law enforcement or counterintelligence, or in some cases, malign influence and psychological operations, but it's a whole spectrum. And our adversaries, they view this warfare on a spectrum. And it's everything from ransomware actors who are proxies or criminal groups that are allowed to operate with impunity within Russia, through undermining our elections and our political process, to the Chinese who are committing corporate espionage on a daily basis to undermine us in the global economic sphere and execute economic warfare against us, all the way through targeting critical infrastructure, where we saw the Chinese with Volt Typhoon targeting our electric grid earlier this year. But that whole spectrum, we break that out. And if we're trying to defend against that, ransomware is kind of a law enforcement problem, but in reality, it's a private sector problem. And that's what the government has said. They said, private sector, you're on your own, handle that. Anything that has to do with psychological operations or malign influence, yeah, CISA gets involved there. But at the end of the day, it's up to individuals. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the Department of Homeland Security. That's the focal point for all things critical infrastructure and for the government when it comes to cybersecurity.
Who runs that?
Right now, Jen Easterly, who unfortunately West Point grad, won't hold that against her.
Gotcha. Well, so while we're on this topic, this is one thing that I think about a lot is like, okay, America, democracy, it's awesome. Everybody gets a say, but it's also very slow. The benefit to a dictatorship or to communism is they can make it happen now with these types of threats. So they can get right into whatever they want to do and mess some stuff up. From a cybersecurity standpoint, is America just kind of screwed when it comes to getting things done and counteracting and countermeasuring because of the whole bureaucratic system that's created?
I don't think screwed is the right answer. I think in general, I think this is the allure of an authoritarian regime, or authoritarianism in general, is the fact that you're able to give up freedoms for security. We're able to give up freedoms for the ability for your government to quickly respond.
The faster you go, the less security you're going to have.
Absolutely. And so in COVID was a great example of this, where you saw the Chinese government was able to just lock down entire cities and restrict people's movements down to their individual apartments. Now, did it work? Debatable, but they were able to respond to COVID very quickly because people give up their freedoms regularly in an authoritarian regime. By contrast, you look at the way the U.S. responded to COVID. And again, this isn't an indictment on any individual or any party or whatever, but there were people who were saying, you can't make me get a vaccine. You can't make me quarantine. And that's because of the freedoms we had. Right. Yeah. But that's ingrained in us. That's because we value our individual freedoms, our individual rights. It's different. Well, cybersecurity and the cyber war, really, that is a microcosm of the same balance or the same battle that we have between democracies and authoritarianisms, or authoritarian regimes. So China, Russia, authoritarian regimes, they're able to mobilize their entire economy. They're able to mobilize their entire populace to conduct cyber warfare
to whatever they
against
want
us.
to do as a company.
Whereas, so like you can have the Chinese government cyber actors targeting Verizon or Hewlett Packard or Microsoft, and they steal a bunch of IP. They can then take that information, give it right to Huawei or ZTE, and bolster their national champions such that they're competing against us on the international stage from an economic perspective with an advantage because they didn't have to do all of that R&D. They're benefiting directly from government cyber actors, corporate espionage that benefits them. Well, in the US, we're never going to have the NSA going after Huawei to benefit Microsoft. That's not how we function. And we don't believe in that. We believe that's anathema to our capitalistic ideas.
When you say Huawei, because I read your book, what does that mean for everybody listening? Huawei is like one of those technology things that has a bug in it, right?
Well, so Huawei is a Chinese mega company. It's one of their national champions. It's their they are developing and have developed 5G technology, and they are now developing 6G technology. There
was another COVID mystery, right?
There's a lot to it, but Huawei in general, and just like every other company that operates within China, they're subject to Chinese laws. And so Huawei, they make mobile devices, they make 5G routers, they make laptop computers, servers, a whole host of technologies. But every single one of them, the Chinese government can direct them to put backdoors into. The Chinese government can direct them to provide them with access, with data, with information. So if you're carrying around a Huawei phone and you're a U.S. diplomat based in Beijing, the Chinese government can force Huawei to give them access to that phone, and that's wherever you are in the world. So there's some debate. People say, well, can't the U.S. do that too? Sort of, but there are still laws that we are following. So there's a debate, and not to get in the weeds about it, but there's consistently a debate about Section 702 of the FISA Amendments Act, which authorizes the National Security Agency to access certain emails, certain phone records, the content of calls, SMS messages for national security purposes. Well, the restrictions are, though, we can't target U.S. persons. Like the NSA can't just say, I want to see all the SMS messages from Tony Haber that went across Verizon's networks. Here, Verizon, give me access to that information. There has to be foreign
companies, corporate companies. How does that access work for big companies?
They don't have a choice. If you're doing business in the U.S., there is a legal.
No, I'm saying like internal U.S. companies, and they say, hey, national security, I want to access this person's phone. How does that work?
There's a process. You get a national security letter that says, subject to this authority, to this law, you're required to provide me this information.
Like a warrant or like ease of access?
It's called a national security letter. In general, there is a lot of data that goes into a central repository that can then be accessed by NSA analysts. And whenever they access it, there are very specific and very stringent safeguards that are put in place and oversight mechanisms to make sure that NSA analyst isn't just saying, oh, I'm going to go target my ex-wife. I want to see who she's talking to now. There has to be a foreign nexus to it. It has to be there's a
nexus.
Foreign nexus is the critical part. But again, all of this is to say we have very, very strict legal mechanisms in place to restrict what the NSA and what the intelligence community is able to do. That is incredibly different in China.
For me, does that actually uphold? Does it work? Have you seen any kind of leniency in that policy?
Not with the NSA. The only time that we've seen anything that has been any abuse of that program has been through the FBI, because the FBI can get access to that as well, and right. There have been lapses in oversight.
I don't even care.
Yeah.
Like, go get them. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like me as a citizen, when I'm thinking about people going through my information, and that's a big part of the conversation that I want to have with you is like, I've been private for a really long time. At one point, I decided, I was like, They already got everything on me. They're going to go get it. Whatever they want to do, they can get access. If the FBI needs to solve a crime, I don't care. Like, go get it. Just
well,
about it.
And I get that, but that's where it's, and I think again that's the distinction between us,
There's
the U.S. democracies.
Got the right values. That's a trust thing.
Well, but if you even just constitutionally, if you look at the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unlawful searches and seizures without a warrant, right? And so our founding fathers said we don't want the government to be able to just come in and snatch our papers and
line draw when everybody's content, everybody's information is out there, foreign and domestic, and companies are profiting on that data.
Man, this is a good question, and I love this.
Come in like Facebook and like TikTok, like they have everything.
So then this is you're getting
draw.
And Tony, you're getting you're getting to the heart of this. This is a great question.
That's what I want to talk about.
So whenever we're talking about like all the stuff that we're talking about with Section 702 and with wiretapping and with the Chinese have access to via Huawei, all of that is non-public information. That's you're sending text messages or pictures to your wife. There are certain things that you don't want the government to have access to. All of the things that you intend to keep private.
I love X. I just now got on X or Twitter or whatever. I haven't done that like ever. And I just now got on it and I'm like, I can't stop looking at this real stuff. But that's real.
It is. Well, but here's the problem. There are myriad problems with the amount of data that's available. The first problem is that we don't have a federal data privacy regulation that governs how that data is used and what consent mechanisms are required to be in place for you to share that type of information. Right now, there are certain consent mechanisms that if you read the 230-page terms and conditions for X, I'm making that number up, but there was a study done in the top 10 social media applications on your mobile device. If you would read all of the terms and conditions start to finish, I think it would take you something like 7 days to actually get through.
Hey, new terms and conditions, accept. On to the next one.
And nobody reads them. And so is there actual consent. That's one of the problems. So one of the problems we have is we don't have a federal data privacy regulation that determines what companies can do once they're collecting that data, or the appropriate consent mechanisms for people to be sharing the type of information they are, and then what the companies can do with it after the fact. And so where you've got the way X, the way Facebook, the way Instagram, the way TikTok, they all make their money is by they take that data and they market to you. And so they're either selling that data directly to third parties, in which third parties can then tailor their advertising to you through, like they sell to data brokers sell it to third-party advertisers, or they directly sell it to marketing. And so whenever you're on Facebook and you're typing something into Google and you want to find a new pair of shoes
in the background and it pops up,
or saying something and your phone's picking it up because you're like, man, I need a new pair of shoes.
My mind, man.
It's all.
I'll tell you right now.
But that's all because of a lack of a federal data privacy regulation. So all of that information can be shared.
When we hit the accept button on the new terms, okay.
So all that data is out there. There's something that with I forget the exact number, with a very small number of likes, and it's something like 19 likes on Facebook. The Facebook algorithm knows you better than your spouse, and knows the things that you like, what you dislike, but they can actually form a better picture about you than your own spouse.
I believe it.
And the whole reason is because they're able to take all of these different data sets, combine them, and then form a complete picture of you. Here's the problem, and it's really a two-sided problem. The first problem is with all of that data, once you start to apply AI models to it, you can do ungodly things. And so if you're a bad actor,
that's another subject we're about to get into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so if you're the Chinese government and you have access to all of this data via TikTok, and so you have access to very specific location information of individuals, you have access to facial recognition, biometric information. If they're doing dances on there, you have access to their gait, the way they walk. You can essentially fingerprint somebody, but then also through that application, you also have access to their contacts list. You have access to anything that's copied onto their clipboard to include passwords. You have access to certain other applications.
I use notes for my passwords. So like when I put all my passwords together, because you got to change them all the time, I go to Apple phone notes and I make all my notes of username and password for all these sites. Is that open to everybody?
It's if somebody has access to your phone, it is. That's why I would actually recommend you move over to a password manager. And there are a ton of different ones, but it's a password protected third-party application that's secure that would auto-generate passwords for you.
Apple phones are hackable or no?
Anything's hackable. Anything that connects is hackable.
So it's a matter of when, not if.
Yeah. Anything is. And in a lot of cases, we're seeing a lot more what's called SIM swapping, where somebody basically masquerades as you, walks into a Verizon store and says, hey, I'm Tony Haber. My phone got thrown into the river. I need a new one. And they can get your SIM card, your virtual SIM card, ported to a brand new device with all of your contacts, and then your number is listed as theirs. That's one of the problems when you're talking about multi-factor authentication and the way in which we try to secure accounts. If you're securing accounts with SMS, text message-based multi-factor authentication, it's subject to SIM swapping and those types of attacks, because I can then say, hey, I'm Tony Haber. I'm going to log into this account. I need a new username and password. Any SMS, text message-based multi-factor authentication, if I have just swapped your phone, well, now I have access to that multi-factor as well. Whereas if it goes to the third-party application, it avoids that threat.
You're killing me. I have to pay for something new now. With all this inflation and everything going on, what is since we're on the topic, what is the ideal cybersecurity for an individual looking to make sure their passwords don't get hacked, making sure that basically there's no monetary loss as an individual, not a company?
Yeah. So multi-pronged approach. The first thing is make sure that you're never using the same password twice. There are certain password complexities that you need to be using on certain sites. Like your bank probably requires you to use a mixture of uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters. You can't remember all of those. And if you have to do the same thing, so your bank password is probably the same as your email password, probably the same as your Instagram password, because you want to be able to write, Tony the Tiger 12345 exclamation point every time, because it's easy for you to remember. Buddy. I don't want to ouch you on here, but
I might actually use that one. Not.
But so with that, like, it's easier for people to just use the same thing across multiple platforms. The risk that you run there, though, is, let's say I'm a bad actor and I want to get access to your financial accounts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a phishing email that sends you to a false web page that looks like a Gmail page, but it's fake. And it forces you to type in your Gmail user, your Gmail account, and your password. Well, as soon as you do that and you hit enter, I have your information. I can then log into your account.
Against phishing emails.
What's that?
What if I'm a master against phishing emails? I know what the fish looks like. I've never ever hit the fish.
Yeah. So the advent
because of that, or
so the advent of ChatGPT and tools like that.
Yeah.
Nobody's a master phishing email identifier. It's just not possible. And now you've got somebody in Russia where typically you'd see, misspellings, you would see bad grammar, all of that's gone. Now all I have to do is type into ChatGPT, I'm a telemarketer and I'm sending something through Gmail and I want to craft it in this way. And ChatGPT isn't trained to identify every single permutation of what could be a phishing prompt. And so they'll spit out a perfect phishing email for you.
3 days ago, I got an email that said I owed with an invoice for $600 for my podcast platform. I was like, what the? I didn't drink that night. Like, I don't remember doing that. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, but it looked real. Mm-hmm. And it had my entire email address, my home address. I'm like, that would be a hard bill to pay.
So that's called, and that one's business email compromise. So where did that email come from?
McAfee, Internet
McAfee?
Security.
Yeah. So so they flagged it for you, and so you've got an antivirus or cybersecurity tool that they flagged it for you on your email.
Well, I don't use McAfee.
Oh, so it was masquerading
me as like, hey, we found this issue for you. Here's $600 you owe us.
So that's purely a phishing email where somebody was trying to get you to pay them and just dupe you into it. But that same thing, like let's say that was the lore and it said to dispute this charge, click here. Right. And then
when you click that,
it could either be you get malware downloaded to your computer, which in a lot of cases, phishing, sometimes that happens. But generally, the cybersecurity tools that you've got on your computer, they're pretty good at spotting those. Not all the time. I mean, the things do get through, but they're pretty good at spotting those types of things. Typically, what happens is you go to a website that's a phishing site, and it's a spoofed website that has a username and password. And so in this case, if they said, hey, to dispute this charge, click here, you click there, and it takes you to something that looks exactly like your podcast platform site with your username and password. And it says, type in your email address, type in your password. Well, you just gave somebody access to this platform. The problem is, but maybe you use this password. Maybe it's just a one-time use password for this platform. What could somebody really do? Not a whole lot. Maybe they get some more information on you, but that could be a dead end. But let's say you use the same password for your email. For everything. Well, now they have access to all of that. And so now they can actually get into your financial accounts. Now they can drain your accounts. They can open credit cards in your name, and they can, in X, Y, and Z, but it goes on. If they have access to your email, having access to email accounts is actually one of the most pernicious threats, because think about all of the things that go through your email. You have your accounts that say you log in from an unknown device, say, hey, can you verify this? Sometimes it comes to your mobile device, but in a lot of cases it just goes to your email. And every time you log into your financial account, typically you're either doing it with your account number or you're doing it with the email address. If you don't know your password, forget password, it's going to send something to your email. If somebody has access to your email, they're getting that forgot password link. So that's a huge threat. So the first thing you can do, don't use the same password across multiple accounts. Use a password manager with the complexity that it'll say you're not using Tony the Tiger 1 2 3 4 5 exclamation point. It'll be, some 14 digit string of nonsense that you're only using for your financial account, and then rotate it regularly. Every 90 days, change out your passwords, and then just update them and continuously do that and make it part of make it a habit. Is it a pain? Sure. But it's much less of a pain than having your identity stolen.
I do this thing every weekend when I'm like, it's in a different notebook. I got to pull it out though. Where I say, hey, this weekend I'm going to do this. And for this weekend, I actually wrote down all these things on a sticky note.
I can't read that.
The top one says change passwords, and I scratched it out.
Love it.
I scratched it out though. I was like, I don't have time to do that.
Oh, I thought scratching this out meant that you did it.
No, I scratched it out because I was like, so what I do every week, I got into a habit of is I make a list of everything I want to do during the weekend, and then I start, continue. I'm like, I'm not going to do this because I don't have time. I am going to do this because it's important. I scratched out, changed my passwords. So you've made me reconsider, I guess.
Excellent.
Awesome. All right.
As long as I can convert one, I win.
Hey, keep pedaling. So anything else in your story you want to talk about before I start asking you questions?
I'm ready for questions.
You're ready for questions. All right. So I got a rapid fire. These questions come from not just me, from other people that are, in similar business, that want to talk about these things. Because I told, hey, I'm going to have this guy on. What would you ask this guy? Here they go. Is AI. What's the next step with AI and cybersecurity? How do you see that?
So let's talk about first where we are with AI and some of the threats that we're seeing. Talked a little bit about phishing. That's a huge one. And the fact that it's really difficult to identify phishing emails because they're plain text. And whenever they come in, they look like natural language. We are not seeing the same errors. It's not like we've got the Nigerian print schemes that are coming across anymore that are easy to spot. It's really difficult. And so that's the first thing is we really need to up our game with phishing. We really need to be able to identify those. Anytime you're getting something, if you're getting something that has an attachment that you're not expecting or that has a URL from an unknown person, an unknown sender, don't open it. Automatically send that to your security team. Let them take a look at it before you ever open it. So people just have to be on their game with phishing because that's 90% of compromises start with phishing. Where we're going with AI, this is both a good and a bad. AI there has, as with most technologies, there's great opportunity for good, and there's a tremendous opportunity for bad. Unfortunately, the aggressor, typically technology first benefits the aggressor before it benefits the defender, and just across the board.
One of my recent episodes was the guy that works for Microsoft, heavy in AI, and we talked deeply on that. He's going to come back on in a few months to see how it's progressed. So I want to see the other side of the coin.
Yeah. So on the aggressor side, we're seeing a lot more uses of AI, not just through phishing, but also AI-based malware or AI malware that is either developed with or developed incorporating AI. And what this will do is you'll have essentially permeating malware that gets onto a device, and it won't do anything. As in, it won't raise any flags. It's not going to move laterally. It's basically just monitoring network traffic. It's collecting data, collecting information to train that model so that when it goes live, it blends in with the environment. And it's called, in general terms, it's called living off the land. Whenever a bad actor gets onto a device, you want to blend in as best you can with normal traffic so that you don't flag, so you can find the information that you want, or you can get to the part of the network that's going to cause the most damage. But you're going to use the same tools as are native to the environment. You're not going to bring in some random Chinese software to operate on that network, because immediately your CrowdStrike, your Tanium, your McAfee, those are going to flag that. You want to blend in. What AI affords you the opportunity to do is you put this onto a network and it's just looking at traffic. It makes it really difficult to separate the normal from the anomalous if everything looks normal. And so then once you have a tool like this that is just monitoring network traffic, collecting enough data, once it goes live and starts navigating the network and moving laterally and escalating privileges, it's going to do it in such a way that is totally imperceptible to any of the tools that are currently in existence. That's a huge problem, because then that takes away our entire defense mechanism. But on the other side, and so that's one angle. The other angle is AI is going to significantly lower the barrier to entry for cyber actors who are the bad actors who are gaining access to networks. A friend of mine used to be an NSA. NSA Govey was a very, very advanced offensive cyber operator with the NSA, focused on China. He left NSA after more than a decade, ended up going to MIT Business School. Brilliant guy. Developed a capability built on GPT-4 where you could input plain text directions to this tool and essentially say, I want the blueprints, or I want all the files that say F-35 on the network located at this IP address, or that includes this IP address.
Awesome.
The tool would then use Shodan or another port scanning or scanning tool to identify that IP address, all of the devices that are connected to the IP, to that IP address on the open web, scan all of the ports for any open ports. Then it would reach into a bag of open source tools to penetrate that network to try to find all of the different vulnerabilities that they have for what they're running. So basically do a full scan enumerating the network, penetrate that network, then move laterally within the network, identifying all of the files that say F-35 or have anything to do with the F-35. So if they say Air Force, or they say Naval Aviation, or they say cockpit, it might pull all of those back. And then it would exfiltrate those to wherever the cyber operator wanted them to be exfiltrated to. What does that mean? Well, now you don't have to have somebody who's a coder. Now you don't have to have somebody who has any understanding of network architecture, somebody who understands how to navigate the network. It's literally plain text that you're typing in. So AI is going to afford any bad actor the opportunity to simply say, I want to penetrate this network. I'm going to type in a command because I want to go after Tony Haber and his device at this IP address. Go. And it's going to do it. And so AI affords the opportunity where before you had to be pretty advanced. You had to be somebody smart sitting in your mother's basement that just pounded away on a keyboard with, understanding multiple languages, or multiple coding languages, understanding network architecture, being sophisticated. That sophistication is going to go away. And so the barrier to entry being dropped significantly means that we're going to have more players on the bad guys side that we have to defend against. And it's really going to create a lot of noise and clutter the ecosystem to where we have to defend against many, many more bad actors. So that's all in the bad, right? Really bad.
The irony here is the coders built the AI.
Well, they worked themselves out of a job. But the coders are also the ones who are going to make
to do though, right? Like that's what everybody tells you.
Right. But the ones who are going to really make the money off of this is so like bad actors, we're not going to see, we'll still see bad actors that are going in and stealing and conducting ransomware attacks. But like where we're going to see that shift is the ones who are really sophisticated, they're going to be the ones who are developing these AI models and then licensing them out. Or the same as we're seeing this ransomware as a service model, you're going to have people who develop these AI tools. And then they say, yeah, you can use this tool. Anything you get as a result of this,
80% of your dollars. I can do it for 20% of that. And
and you give me, and I get 30% or 20% of whatever you get from any of your attacks as a royalty. And then they do that 100,000 times. And you'll have billionaire malicious actors who are never compromising a network on their own. They're just building the AI models and licensing them out. But that's where we're going.
That's scary.
Yeah, but that's next.
So that's the other side.
The good side.
When I talk to this guy, I haven't done an episode in a while because I've been busy. But the last time I did an episode, I did it with a guy, high school friend, big in the AI space, and he's on the other side of the coin of the AI and the development, and these are the positive things. So it's good to hear the other side of it, what could be, because I think that's, folks in our generation, we've been through, the start of the internet to, AI, the first meme to like AI memes and
deep fakes.
There are attention and the attention game that's currently going on with like, if you, put your mind into that attention game of the TikTok and the Instagram and all those things, you keep on flipping and swiping, it's going to warp your mindset,
Oh, yeah.
So I think now's a great time to really discuss these things. And I appreciate you, getting on to talk about it. So anything else on AI before I keep on moving?
Well, you reminded me of one more thing. So earlier this year, we had the first successful use of a deepfake video in a business email compromise, where the CFO of a company in Hong Kong ostensibly got on a video call with one of the controllers, and the controller, believing that his CFO was telling him to make a transferred $25 million to a fake account. And so typically we see this, it's all done through email. And I always advise clients, get on a call, get on the phone with somebody.
So I need to learn how to make fake videos and ask CEOs for money. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's a great business model.
That's insane.
Oh, so that's another threat that people are not really prepared for. Because you want to believe your eyes. You want to believe I want to believe that this is not deep fake Tony.
Yeah. It's like, it's like religion. I want to see it. I want to feel it, like there's a faith, but there's also like, I want to see the actual thing take place. And it just happened for that ransomware thing that just happened for 25 million. That's nuts.
Yep.
But it worked.
It worked.
Scary. All right. Next question, rapid fire. So that was the first rapid fire question. It wasn't so rapid, but it was good. The next one is, do we have a talent and strategy thing going on for America to countermeasure this, or no?
Is sort of, and that's I think my nice way of saying no, but sort of. So, do we have a strategy? Yes, we have a strategy. Is the strategy working? Debatable. You mentioned talent.
If we were a authoritarian government, would it work faster?
Well, it would work faster in the sense that we could force people to do things. I could force you to change your password every night.
Not fighting for that. I just wanted to ask the question.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the ability to force things down people's throats, make them utilize certain technologies, and then require that they give the government access to their networks to go threat hunting, yeah, we'd be better off.
Got
But
back to democracy.
we'd be giving up freedoms, we'd be giving up privacy as a result. Like, let's say you're a government contractor, and maybe you haven't been entirely forthright with what you are saying in your government contracts. Maybe you don't have all of these things in place that you're saying you do. You don't want the FBI on your network, because at the end of the day, you very well may be hit with a False Claims Act suit because the FBI identifies that you are not actually adhering to the terms of your contract, or you were acting in a fraudulent way. So people want to maintain that security or maintain that privacy because they don't necessarily trust that the government has their best interest in mind all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
So that's and there are other things to go along with it too.
Yeah, sideswipe.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, but it's a valid point, because sometimes if a company is required, if we're saying the FBI has to get on their network, well, let's say the FBI makes a change in their environment that has cascading effects because the FBI doesn't know what's in their technology stack, has cascading effects that costs millions of dollars worth of damage.
I'm just thinking about the other side of the coin with getting stuff done versus not for a good reason. So.
Yeah. Well, so the question you asked about with strategy and talent. Currently, there is about a 700,000 person job or cybersecurity deficit. We need, in order for us, 700,000. We need 700,000 individuals entering the cybersecurity field to be where we need to be from a security perspective writ large. That deficit is enormous. And we are, unfortunately, graduating more and more lawyers every year as opposed to security engineers. But that deficit isn't just people who are hands-on keyboard. That deficit is attorneys. That deficit is people just in the cybersecurity profession. We need more people who are doing it, more people who are versed in this, so that we can adequately defend the private sector and adequately defend the government. That number is not getting smaller. If anything, it's getting bigger. And so that's an area we really need to focus. That's an area where the government needs to make significant investments in colleges, universities, and really more importantly, trade schools, because not everybody needs to go to college. And so if we have more people going to trade schools, getting these types of skills, going right into the workforce where they can be making $150,000, $200,000 with a trade school education, that's huge. And then they're not coming out of school with a significant amount of debt, and we're solving the workforce issue.
High school right now, I'd go into a trade school, learn the technical, go do that. Because right now, if you're in the trades, you're definitely making more than the manager.
We put such an emphasis on college education, and I think in certain industries, and cybersecurity being one of them, we shouldn't be putting the same premium on it, but we are, and it's a cultural thing that we need to overcome. So that's the talent issue. We have a talent issue. There are certain efforts to try to get after that, but so far they've been insufficient. Strategy. So strategy-wise, what's our strategy? The problem that we have, we do have a strategy. And if you look at what we're doing with ransomware, there's a lot of indictments that are coming out from the Department of Justice. The FBI is going out, investigating. Department of Justice is prosecuting. Very rarely are we getting indictments and bringing these people before a jury. The reason being is because they're in Russia. They're in China. We're never going to get extradition of these individuals. But that's not why the strategy exists. The reason why we continue to do these indictments of people that we know are never going to get into a courtroom is because we're building a coalition in the international community such that if we need a group of countries to counter something that China's doing, we can point to all of this body of evidence, all of these individual proxies, these bad actors that have been targeting countries or targeting companies in countries worldwide. And we can say, look at this body of evidence. This is why you want to side with us and not China. China is an irresponsible actor.
So to continue on with the rapid fire questions, being in food and beverage. So, most of the people that listen to this are Navy football guys or Navy guys. We also got a few folks from a food and beverage standpoint that listen to this, because that's what I've been doing for the past 8 years, and sodas, and now I'm at cocktail mixers. Being in food and beverage, thinking of water supply, thinking of supply chain SCADA systems. As any plant manager out there in manufacturing, if they got a SCADA system, they could always see what's going on. They can see the valves, they can see the flow, they can see what's going on. What's that threat look like from a food and beverage standpoint for America with attacks like these?
So food and beverage in general is an interesting one. We've seen recently, there was a JTM Foods several years ago got hit with a ransomware attack. And there was a cascading effect across the beef market because JTM Foods is the largest, I think the largest.
JBT?
What is it?
JBT?
Maybe that's it. Yeah, I think I'm misremembering. JBT. Hang on. Yeah. And that was JBS, not JBT.
Yeah, you got it. There
Yeah,
it is.
2021. Thank you for that, though. But JBS, so in 2021, they got hit with ransomware that had a cascading effect on the food system because they weren't able to get
meat getting held up and stopped and stalled.
And think about this. And so it didn't actually stop. Like a cyber attack isn't killing cows, right? Like the cyber attack isn't killing there's no life support system. But
manufacturing process. So
in a lot of cases, so like JBS, they had the stalls that the cows were in, right? Those are all mechanical and they're all controlled by a SCADA system. All the grain and feed that was coming in, it's all on a SCADA system. Their logistics that goes for actually bringing it in via rail or bringing it in via truck, all of that is subject to their network. So the network was encrypted.
A downside to some automation.
Exactly. And it can be in any industry. And so if you think about like in the auto industry, if you hit a Ford manufacturing plant, you can take that assembly line offline because it's all robotics. It's all automated.
Yeah, I'm in Kentucky. Right. It's the major employer Ford is for the entire state. It's not.
So to that end, though, how many people are actually turning wrenches in a Ford plant anymore? Right? They're operating.
It's mostly automated. Right.
Or they're managing or they're operating those machines, but the machines are driven by operational technology within their network. Hopefully, the operational technology is separated. But in food and beverage, in large part, we don't think in that context because it's not as though there's a highly mechanized manufacturing plant. But in the case of JBS, think about all the different things that are interconnected, where that can bring the food supply chain or the beef supply chain to a grinding halt. What are the cascading effects of that? Well, if you're a healthcare system and all of the food within the healthcare system, all the beef is coming from one manufacturer or from one central location, well, suddenly now you may be without food in a hospital where that's feeding patients. If you're relying on that beef, or if you're relying on that beef as McDonald's.
I had a similar situation with cans. So I used to make sodas, and the whole supply got cut off with cans. We had to go to other suppliers and had to adapt. And it was a mess.
Right. And so
all these cyber attacks, like someone gets hit, like as a company, you got to be able to have a couple of different options, right?
Yeah. And in food and beverage in particular, like food and beverage by itself, if you just say that, people aren't going to think, oh, that's critical infrastructure. And in large part, they're right. Food and beverage may not be, but food and agriculture is. Yeah. And so food and agriculture writ large, and there's such a reliance on the food from the food and agriculture sector, which is something that is critical infrastructure, can be targeted by a nation state and can cause significant issues. But let's say the water or wastewater systems get taken offline. What would the impact be to food and beverage? Like there are cascading effects that if you have a water treatment plant that gets taken offline, suddenly if you're a rancher in an area that's fed by that water treatment plant, you're going to have livestock dying because they're dehydrated. So what's the backup?
How much of inflation with regards to groceries might be related to cyber attacks?
I don't think there is as close a relation as you think. I think there are other costs that are going up.
On my mind, like when I go to the grocery store, it's a little bit different than 4 years ago. So I had that. So.
I think that has more to do with just inflation in general. And that's more of a stem from our response to COVID than it is to like the government's response monetarily to COVID. Yeah, I think that's more of that. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other costs that are being passed on to consumers as a result of cyber attacks. There certainly are. And one of the biggest places we're seeing is in insurance. It's a lot harder for companies to get cyber insurance. And it's a lot more expensive as the actuarial models with cyber insurance are starting to become more refined. We're also seeing those premiums go up because they're factoring in the increasing risk that we're seeing year on year. Well, if a company's costs are going up on the insurance side, those costs are going to be passed on to consumers in some form or fashion. And so there may be some contributing factor to where you're seeing certain prices go up based on the increase in insurance premiums.
That was one of my rapid fire questions is how critical is cyber insurance for a company?
Yeah, it's so huge, right? And now, all that being said, it depends on the company. I had a Fortune 500 company get hit with complex ransomware. They self-insured. They took all the money that they would have been paying in premiums and they put it towards their security. And they did a hell of a job in responding. And they suffered maybe
what that company is.
But they're a almost $40 billion a year company. This attack maybe cost them 1.5 million, maybe all in, and that's upgrading their networks, upgrading their systems. But it's because they pay $10 million a year in cybersecurity. They have their own security operations center. They have all of the best tools. They train their people well. They invest in security, and they say, what are we going to get from insurance? And they're right. Not every company is like that. I also have another company right now, smaller business, you're probably talking 5-6 million in annual revenue, got hit with ransomware. They're in the healthcare sector and they service multiple healthcare or health systems. But when they got hit with ransomware, no insurance. Because they have no insurance, they're eating the cost of what's effectively going to be $2 million.
Well, that company probably just raised their costs on all their customers.
Absolutely. Right. But in that regard, if you have a company that's doing 5-6 million a year in revenue, $2 million in costs for ransomware is very different than a $2 million bill for a $40 billion a year company. So for that smaller company, insurance is absolutely imperative because that's the determining factor whether that company lives or dies. So insurance can be really important, but it depends on the risk, it depends on the exposure, and it's company specific. I would say I always advise companies, if they're on the fence about it, go with insurance. Because you can be wrong and have insurance.
Yeah, go with the medium style. You don't have to go to the high side, not the low side. Just kind of dip your toes in and.
Right.
Awesome. All right. So let's keep on knocking out these rapid fire questions. What can Americans do? You know, what the listener, the folks at home, like what can a normal person do on this topic to be prepared?
So I'll give you a couple of just concrete things. First, Google yourself. See what kind of information is about you out there. Because if I'm a bad actor, and let me put this in context. When I was in government, when I was at Cybercom, this is exactly what I did to go after adversaries. I would research them. And when you would research people, because ultimately the target is a person. Yeah, the target's a network. You want to be able to compromise a network. You want to get access to the information. But there's a person behind that keyboard. There's a person who creates the password. If I'm going to try to get into a network, I'm going after the weakest link. The weakest link is the person. So Google yourself. See what's available. See what information is there about you. Because if I'm approaching you on LinkedIn and I'm going to try to take a conversation off of LinkedIn to WhatsApp or to an SMS text message where I think I can send you a phishing lure that you're going to click, I'm going to do a bunch of research on you. And I'm going to say, hey, Tony Haber, you used to be with Dr. Pepper. He played Navy football. I played at Army, go Army, beat Navy, and start to get you into this thing or get you into a back and forth where suddenly you trust that I am who I say I am. I've built rapport with you. And now if I send you something like a link, you're going to be much more likely to click on it. But if there's not that information out there about me or not that much information, then you're making it harder for the bad actor. Some of the ways to do that. So understand what's out there about you. Limit the amount of information that you're putting out. If you're going on vacation and you like next week, let's say you're going to where you're going to Florida, you put on Instagram, I can't wait for this Florida vacation next week. It's going to be awesome. I'm a bad actor. I now know that you're on vacation. If you're the CEO of a company and you're saying that you're going on vacation, now I know is the time that I want to target your company. I want to target your email so that I can pretend to be you on vacation, because the chances of your CFO, the chances of your controller calling you while you're on vacation to verify this wire transfer request that I just put in is pretty low. So if you don't have to put the fact that you're going on vacation on Instagram, don't put it on Instagram. And make sure that if you're the CEO of a company, you probably want to have that conversation with your wife and kids as well, because people are looking at them too. So understand what your footprint is. There are a lot of tools out there where people can get a third party that's going to proactively go out and delete information, and delete it from Google, delete it from, not from Facebook, from third-party data aggregators, and they'll do it proactively on your behalf. It ends up being like maybe $20 a month. But I guarantee if you Google me right now, there's very limited information. You might have something about the Naval Academy.
I tried.
Yeah.
There's a reason. Website and everything that was like professional. I didn't find any dirt. So I was looking for the dirt.
But there's a reason. No, but honestly, I practice what I preach, my friend. But there's a reason. So understand what the exposure is. The next thing is also be aware of your credit. The easiest thing in the world to do is freeze your credit. If you're not taking out a loan, if you're not trying to buy a car, if you're not opening a new credit card, there's no reason for your credit, somebody to be able to access your credit. Freeze your credit. It might be a next step or an extra step that when you go buy a car, you have to unfreeze it, but it reduces the likelihood significantly, almost to zero, that somebody can steal your identity. So go to the major credit unions and freeze your credit. You can also go to like Experian or Equifax, and they offer these identity lock services. And it ends up being, I don't know, $40 a year. And you can freeze your credit. You get regular updates when your credit has changed. If somebody's opening cards and destroying your credit or running up like a $10,000 bill on a credit card, you'll get notifications about it. Be informed. So those two things. And then we talked about this earlier. Get a password manager. Don't use the same password, and use multi-factor authentication where it's available. If you've got a Gmail account, Google allows you to do multi-factor authentication to the Google Authenticator app. Use it, because if somebody gets access to your email, they're probably also going to be able to get access to your financial information or to your other accounts. So those are the three things I'd recommend.
Cool. Couple more rapid fire, and then we'll go into the closer of this thing. Is and this is a big one for me too, is what can we do for our kids relating to cybersecurity awareness? Because they're coming up, like if you think about our, age group and coming up, and internet's new, it's like, Napster, and then all of a sudden it's internet that actually works fast. And then now it's like, holy crap, AI is going on. What are our kids going to need to know? Not just in the next, like now, in the next couple of years, but in 10 years. What's your thought on that?
So our kids are growing up as digital natives. And this is actually a term that I really like. I obviously didn't coin it, but it's something that I think describes it really well. Because our kids are growing up in an environment where they're constantly engaging with technology. They're constantly using the internet and different tools. And as it's evolving and as it's adapting, so are they. And they're adapting to the uses of technology. So they're going to be much more savvy than we are. Where we're learning it almost as a second language, they're fluent from the start. So they have a leg up. What we need to make sure, though, and this is both from a security perspective as well as just from a welfare perspective. From a security perspective, kids who are starting on LinkedIn, or not LinkedIn, God, if they have a LinkedIn, good on them at 10 years old, but they're starting with like Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and they're 10 years old. Think about the information that's being shared, that they're already creating this digital.
My son is talking to me about stuff. I'm like, holy crap, I didn't know that. Yeah. Like it's nuts. It blows my mind, but at the same time, there's a little bit of scary side to it. So that's why I ask.
Well, and think about all the information. And so TikTok, and I pick on TikTok because it's a Chinese company and I can't wait for it to be banned in the US. But
Yeah, that's
TikTok,
another topic.
yeah.
So,
Oh, we could go for hours on that too. But TikTok in particular, think about all the data that they collect. TikTok says they don't permit kids under the age of 13 on their platform, and that's for COPPA. Because you're in this country, you can't kids under the age of 13, you're not allowed to collect information from. So every company, every social media platform has to say, you must be 13 years or older to use our platform. But at the end of the day, it's the parents who are going to determine whether or not the kids are on there. So if you've got a 10-year-old and he or she is on TikTok, all of the data from the device is being collected, their contact list, everything that they post, everything that they like, everything that they view, everything that they share. That's creating an entire dossier on that individual that can then be, that's going to stay with them for the rest of their lives. Because that information, whether it's TikTok or
I didn't have that dossier going on when I was in high school.
Yeah. Think about the things that you were searching in high school, right? Yeah. But all that information stays with them. So now let's say fast forward 25 years. What's going to happen when we've got somebody running for Congress, Senate, or for the presidency, and they've now have 35, 40 years worth of digital detritus, like these footprints that follow them along. And all of this information can be used, can be categorized, can be cataloged. AI can be adapted or applied to it so that you can really identify things that are truly meant to be private that suddenly are way out in the open. Like just from that perspective of the harm that it can do down the line. And we're starting to see this with JD Vance right now. There's a lot coming out about JD because he's younger. I think he's 39.
He was a Marine.
He was a Marine. Yeah, he's an attorney. Yeah. But like, think of all the information that there is about him on social media, because when he was growing up on Facebook. And so we've never had a vice presidential candidate who has had the same problem. This is going to get exponentially worse simply because of the amount of data that's going to be available on our kids. So that's the first thing. And then it's also what can be done with that data. You can create deep fakes based on kids. There's the risk of, like, if your kid's on TikTok and their face is out there, anyone can take their face and make kitty porn, AI-based kitty porn on your child's image simply because they are on TikTok.
Deep fake thing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So there are a lot of risks that go with it. There was a case in Florida where two 13-year-olds basically took pictures of all of their classmates, and I think it was from Instagram, and put them and created all of these deep fake porn videos of 13-year-olds because they thought it was funny to, like, say, hey, look, Billy and Susie, or Billy and Susie. They're creating kitty porn. And like, kids are able to do this without realizing the significant ramifications and the really significant penalties that go along with this. Not only the creation of that, but then what follows it and the ecosystem that they're supporting.
When I read your book, I tapped into the dark web access thing. Like, never been there. When you mentioned that, you said something about hiring a hitman. I was like, oh, nice. Like, now I know where to go get a hitman. Like, the whole dark web is totally, out of sight, out of mind for someone like me. When you wrote about it, I was like, oh, maybe this is where a lot of bad things are happening.
Absolutely.
Like, it's nuts.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is the onion router, which everybody, when you say the dark web, typically people access the dark web via Tor or the onion router. That was actually created by the U.S. Navy as a way for intelligence officers to communicate directly with assets.
Nice.
And then it was made public, and in a way that we can now have journalists who are communicating with their sources in China or in North Korea. Yeah.
I just watched the new movie, The League of, whatever's on Amazon right now with the new World War II guys that are, and they're doing Morse code about, hey, this is what's going on. So Tor was the thing for the Navy to get stuff done and communicate undetected. And now it's become the dark internet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, just from that perspective, and we kind of went on a tangent there about kids. That's the first thing I would say. And the other one is, your kids, there's no reason for your kids to have their credit their social security number just out in the open. There's no reason to be sharing their social security number. If your schools are asking for social security numbers, there should be a reason. They should be asking that for that one time. It shouldn't be just something standard on forms. And so parents should start to push back on where they're providing that type of information, because as we've seen really recently, schools are not impregnable, and they're becoming more and more targets of cyber attacks because of the type of information that they have. So be leery of where you're sharing your kids' information, and then freeze their credit. Your kid's not taking out a loan. They're not taking out a mortgage. Freeze their credit. There's no reason for it to be open, because what you don't want to have happen is your kid turns 18, they apply for a credit card, and suddenly they've got like a credit score of 600 because when they were 10, somebody opened a card in their name and ran up a $100,000 bill.
Yeah. One thing that we've done as a family is we've opened a gas card, Kroger gas, on all our kids. And every time we get gas, it adds a little bit to the credit score.
I think that's smart.
But don't release it. Keep it safe.
Yeah. But even with that, you've got that card open. You're not going to open another card with your kid, so freeze your kid's credit.
Yeah.
That way nobody else can open an account either.
Noted. Awesome. All right. Last rapid fire question before we close this thing out is cloud adaptation as a nation on its way using AI. And we've got all this data out there, as a target, foreign and domestic. Are any companies or governments rethinking the cloud? We're so connected. Could we uncouple that and still function?
The question becomes really, do you want to? And so we've pushed a lot and the government has advised that we move to cloud, to adopt cloud environment and cloud solutions. The cloud is essentially somebody else's server. It means that you're moving your data from an on-prem server that you're responsible for securing
to data popping up everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
$multi-million investments. It's nuts.
And they're huge. And you drive through Northern Virginia, and it's just data that's the farmland.
Northern Virginia is the biggest data center apocalypse / mecca of data centers.
Yeah, it's huge. I was just there last weekend, and it's just data center after data center, and it's old farmland that's now just covered with these multi-acre facilities that are just servers.
Yeah,
nothing but air conditioners on top.
It got bought out by a big server company
by AWS.
Money.
Yep. So the question becomes, it's not necessarily like, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Ultimately, I think there is a net positive, but people have to understand that cloud, number one, it's not monolithic. If you say, hey, we're moving to the cloud, great, what does that mean? Well, there's multiple types of cloud. Are you getting infrastructure as a service? Are you getting a platform as a service? Is it software as a service? How much integration, how much control do you have over it? Are you using public cloud, private cloud, hybrid? What type of cloud are you using? And a lot of it has to do with what you're willing to pay, but it also has to do with use case. Like if you're storing protected health information in a cloud, it better be a private cloud. If you're using something else, like if you're using it for payment card information, should be a private cloud. If it's something that's more administrative in nature, you could probably use a public cloud or a hybrid, which is less secure. But ultimately, the security that you get in a cloud environment is the security that company provides. And so if you go to AWS, you go to Oracle, you go to Google Cloud, you go to Microsoft Azure, you're getting the security that they put on it. That security is only around the outside of the cloud. You can purchase the security so that you also have it on your specific cloud environment, but that's up to you. And then it comes down to credentials. Who's accessing your cloud? Who's updating the security controls in your cloud? Who are you giving access to your cloud environment to? Because if you're not using multi-factor authentication, if you're allowing just anybody who comes into your building to access your cloud, then it's not going to be secure, and it's no better than it being on-prem. So that piece of it, where people think this is just a panacea of security, we're moving to the cloud, is just it's a fallacy. That's not the way this works. If you weren't secure on-prem, you're probably going to be more secure in the cloud, but you're not going to be 100% secure. There's still a little bit that goes along with it. That being said, should you go to the cloud? Well, in some cases, maybe not. Because what happens if all of your data, and if you're, let's say, your critical infrastructure and your operational technology and all of your backups to your operational technology, you're storing those in a data center in the cloud. Great use of cloud. Because if you get hit with ransomware and you need to pull from backups to get your operational technology back up and running for the latest reboot that you have, great. You want to have that offsite. You want to have that somewhere that's not connected, that a threat actor wouldn't be able to access. But if you're running everything off of the cloud and your backups are in that same cloud environment, what happens when AWS goes down? What happens when Oracle goes down? Where's your failover? And so ideally
like so many Amazon packages. I'm like, oh, here's another one.
Yeah, but ideally you want to have something that if you're relying on a cloud environment, or if you're relying on the cloud to operate your business, your backups should be somewhere else. Your backups should not be with that same cloud provider, because if for whatever reason they go down and they don't have appropriate failovers, you still need to, because you can't just say to your customers, yeah, I don't know, AWS went down and that's where all of our data was. So sorry, you still owe us money on the contract. Your customers are like, yeah, that's not how this works. So understanding that and so in some cases, maybe on-prem does make sense for certain types of certain functions, certain operations, and maybe cloud makes sense for others. But ultimately, having a strategy, understanding what the risk is, understanding what the security protocols that you need to have in place are really important. You need to have somebody that knows how to manage it, and probably a really good attorney.
Well, we know who to call, right?
I got to throw that shameless plug in there.
100%. So one of the recent books that I've read is not just yours. There's one that's yours, but it is Nuclear War by Annie Jacobson. And what is the risk right now for America's power grid for a cybersecurity attack?
I would say the risk is coming from two different places. The first, the risk that I would say the most likely course of action versus most dangerous course of action. We'll put it in those brackets. The most likely course of action of where something would happen that would harm the grid would be from ransomware or from a criminal actor. Somebody who is unintentionally just looking for a target of opportunity to try to extract a payment or to extort a company, and knowing that if they take it offline, there's going to be significant problems. We saw this happen, Colonial Pipeline, when that was taken out by, I think, DarkSide ransomware group. Yeah. So that took Colonial Pipeline. The attack itself didn't take it offline. Colonial Pipeline made the business decision to shut down their pipeline to make sure that it didn't spread, which caused, there were cascading effects there. Well, if that happens on the electric grid, we don't have redundancy in our electric grid the way you think we would. The giant power generators that we have, those are essentially in-time manufacturing. If we need to replace one of those because they've been taken offline, and oh, by the way, Idaho National Labs did this a few years back where they showed that a cyber attack could completely destroy one of these things.
Cost-cutting repercussions.
Yeah, it's going to take months for that just-in-time manufacturing to replace those generators, or those the I forget what they're called, the power transmission.
Yeah, the power grids are cut up into West Coast, East Coast, and Texas.
It's because everything's bigger. Everything's bigger.
That book, Yeah. And when I read that, I was like, damn straight.
Yep. So, but to that end, let's say
grid is struggling with the heat.
Well, it's because it's disconnected, right? It's Texas is going to do it themselves. I'm not throwing shade on Texas. I love Texas.
I know you're from the East Coast. It's okay.
It's all right.
We'll be all right.
But so that's, I think, most likely where we're going to see risks to the power grid is actually not from non-state actors that are using it as target of opportunity. And the reason I say that is because if we're getting attacked, if it's our power grid that's getting attacked by a nation state, and they're taking it offline and actually making the power go out, they're doing it because we're at war, because that is an act of war. And so if China takes out our power grid, whether they're doing it with a cruise missile or whether they're doing it with a cyber attack really is irrelevant. But they have the ability to fully take our power grid offline if they so choose to. there isn't anything that is impenetrable. And if you've got a motivated nation state with unlimited resources going after a network, they're going to penetrate it. They're going to compromise it. They're going to cause whatever damage they want to. But again, if they're going to do that, that's an act of war. That's going to raise a response. That means that we're going to do something in kind back to them. And we've got pretty good cyber capabilities. We've also got 11 aircraft carriers that have a very itchy trigger finger to start steaming east and heading towards China. So is it worth it to them?
Best man at my wedding, Matt Nishak, he just got back from a deployment about a year. Out there, and I'd like to get him on one of these episodes pretty soon. Hopefully I can, but it's funny how that works. Anyways, let's keep moving. What's your biggest failure or current opportunity or thing that you're working through today? I always ask this on every single episode because I want to hear what the guest is, struggling with or working through to keep them pushing. So,
honestly, wow, that's a good question. I would say biggest opportunity I have, biggest opportunity is the firm I'm at. We're very much growing a practice. And so there's leadership opportunity, there's entrepreneurial opportunity, there's opportunity to really make a splash and become a household name, or at least within the legal profession, become a name that is directly analogous to cybersecurity. And that's what we're going for. And we're building, and we're really swinging for the fences on building our practice. Actually, we recently hired the former Deputy General Counsel for U.S. Cyber Command, who's a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel. Guy has done 23 years in the Marine Corps, where he's been all over, but really a true expert in cybersecurity, true expert in national security law, in all things government. And we're putting a lot of eggs in the basket of we are going to become a premier, if not the premier, cybersecurity legal practice in the country. So the opportunity there is growing that. Certainly, there are the pressures, there's the stress that goes along with that. But I love the opportunity because we're training a lot of junior attorneys. We're training a lot of, in cross-training, a lot of junior attorneys who had some exposure to this, but really focused their careers elsewhere. And now they have the opportunity to really dive in, and they're seeing the passion, and I'm seeing the passion in them. But they're seeing the good that can come from this, and really the major difference that can be made for companies and for national security. And it's always fun to see them light up with actually making a difference, actually delivering results for clients.
Gotcha. Good stuff. That was a good response for your company. How about for you?
For me, I've got 3 kids. I've got an almost 12-year-old. I've got a 6-year-old. I've got a 7-month-old. All boys. And I very much want to make sure they're growing up as men of service, and that they are growing up. Yeah, that they're growing up and they see what's important. And it's not always chasing money. And it's not chasing the bottom line. It's doing something that you're passionate about. It's doing something that makes a difference. And it's aligning your passions, your interests with something that's gonna change the world, or something that's gonna make the world a better place.
That's what I wanted to hear right there. It's awesome. Because you're on the right track, man. Good stuff. Last question. What's your price of admission?
My price of admission. So it's funny, the pre-interview discussion, we were talking about what that means. And so for me, the price of admission, it's actually a concept that I learned. I was stationed in Japan for a little while. And there's a concept called IKIGAI. And it's spelled IKIGAI. And the concept is essentially, this is, if you want to find balance, if you want to find something that allows you to truly be happy, you need to match up. And it's kind of this rotating Venn diagram, or this multiple overlapping Venn diagram of finding what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. And if you can align all of those things, then you're aligning your mission, your passion, your vocation into one area. And if you can stay in the center of that block, and what you're doing is something that you love and you're making a difference and you're good at it, you enjoy it, and you're getting paid for it appropriately, you're going to find happiness and you're going to find drive. And for me, that drive and the constant push to keep moving forward is because I feel like I've found that. And I've found that center mass of what I want to keep doing and what I want to do for the rest of my life. So my price of admission is finding your IKIGAI.
Awesome. ShamWow. Dude. Awesome. You've definitely educated me today. Got a lot of interest in this. And as you just explained in your Ichigai? What's it called?
IKIGAI.
Ikigai. Ikigai. On your way. So thanks for getting on. It was awesome. Thank you. And thank the wife. Is so reading the book, Whitney, maybe?
No, Teresa.
Man, messed that up. So anyway, tell Teresa, thank you. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot of demands on your plate, and getting you on today means a lot. So thank you, and best of luck. I'll keep on watching. They're gonna make it big because you're in the right space at the right time. You know, forward thinking, and the world needs it. So.
I appreciate it, Tony. Hey, this has been great. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. It's always great to catch up.
Yeah. Long time no talk, but we talked today, and that was good.
Absolutely.
All right, dude. Take care.
All right, brother. Take it easy.